Howdy, Evan Gao, indie developer of Story Origin here. I recently had a great conversation around self-publishing and building your audience with Philip Duncan. And one thing in particular that I found amazing was how he got over 200 reviews on his book across both Amazon and Goodreads. And the way that he did it was he made his book free for 5 days and then created a promo stack to push audiences towards that book during that time frame that was free. So that consisted of two parts. The first was paying for slots in paid newsletter promotions on various sites. And the second part was extending the reach of his own newsletter through group promos and newsletter swaps that he arranged on Story Origin. That way he could really maximize his reach of his book during the time frame that was free, which resulted in thousands of downloads and over 200 reviews, and those reviews on Amazon being verified as well. So he's got a lot of other great advice, and I've created some highlights from our conversation. So let's go ahead and jump into it.
Trying to find something that I enjoyed because I know what I was doing. I didn't, so I was basically throwing anything at a wall to see what stuck. But I kind of always in the back of my head knew I liked writing and stuff like that, but I knew nothing about self-publishing. I was probably like most people, and it was like traditionally publishing was like the only thing I ever heard of, so I thought that was the route you would go. I kind of saw it was possible to do it full time. You know, it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint, but it can be absolutely a full-time career. And then it came down to what kind of books did I want to write. I can think back to just getting started, and there's 1,000 things going through your head, and you just don't know where to start. And if you're anything like me, you end up starting about 10 different spots, which means you don't ever get to the finish line of anything. And I know this because the job I worked at before was a small business, so I knew the importance of an email list. I just didn't realize how important it was as an author, as a self-published author. And I was like, well, how do you get an email list? What email provider do you go to? What do you write these people? Like, you think nobody's ever going to get on your email list. Like, there's no way some random person's going to stumble across you. I stumbled across Story Origin, and it was like I had 0 people on my list. I had no idea how to get anybody on my list. That's where my very first email subscriber comes, and that's where I go to when that's where my continual growth comes from. Being able to connect with people on my list, like, that's been really cool, and I think that in the long run helps with your platform and your brand and getting more sales and stuff like that. Every time I look at Amazon, I feel like I get a couple new reviews on there, and it's like right now I'm not pushing. I don't have ads running or promos running or anything like that. I just think as people trickle in onto my email list and they get my book and they'll go on Amazon and they'll leave a review or something like that, which is huge. I didn't understand the concept of it when I first did it, so I was just like, well, I don't have a lead magnet or a reader magnet. I don't want to spend the time to write one when I could be writing my next book. I'll just make my first book my reader magnet. I tell people now, like, if you can get a reader magnet, especially if you haven't launched a book yet or published a book, it's just short story, or I've seen some really creative different ways people have done it, but it just has to be something with enough attention grabbing, like whatever it is for that genre, that is going to give somebody the incentive to give you their email, since that's the whole point of it. That first book is really just that first stepping stone. Write that first book and use that as a reader magnet, or use that to get people on your list. Like, that's so important. And then focus on writing more books, because that's where the money comes from. You can have a reader magnet, but if somebody can't find it, it doesn't do anything. I've got a landing page on my website, so if anybody just ever stumbles across my website, they can just type in their email and it sends it to them. Or if I'm ever like maybe running really, really, really low, cheap Facebook ads, it's just my link is to my reader magnet my Story Origin reader magnet page, which makes it like super easy for them to just go on. I get their email, they download it, and it's seamless. And I don't run Facebook ads all the time, and I actually haven't done it in a while. But when I do, I just set like a $5 limit for the day, and I just target 2 big people in my genre. I'm more concerned with getting an email than I am getting $1.50 commission from Amazon. And I've seen like, I don't know if it's just my genre being a thriller genre or what, but I've seen, you know, 50, 60, 70, 100 signups in a day from that $5. Like it's wild sometimes. I didn't Since I've started, my open rate have always hovered between about 33 and 40%, and it's never really wavered too far one way or the other. But I think a lot of it is about having a welcome sequence. So as soon as you get somebody's email, they shouldn't be sitting there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before they ever hear from you. If you wait 2 weeks, they'll be like, "Oh, wait, who are you? Like, I got your. Oh, I didn't even know I had your book. I totally forgot. Like, oh, I'll read it sometime," and then you'll never hear from them. They'll unsubscribe, whatever. They want to know whatever. They want to know why you wrote a certain character in. They want to know why'd you pick that scene or why'd you pick that location. Why did you kill your main character's family off in the first 2 pages, which happens in my first book. So it's like, if you can share these things, I think it kind of gets them into your mind, and they kind of feel personally connected with you, which I think you have to do as soon as you can, or they're going to lose interest. They're going to forget who you are. I think having a call to action, especially for engagement back, is really important, especially getting started or having somebody new on your list, because that gives you that first chance to make an initial impression and kind of have that connection with that person. If I share maybe like what really drove me into becoming a self-published author, and then it's like maybe my call to action will be like, hey, have you ever thought about writing a book? Like, if so, like, what kind of book would you like to write? And it's like, even if the person just replies romance, like, that's it, they just send one word with a period and that's it, like, no really engagement, you just, oh, that's great, who's your favorite author to read? And what you respond back with is what's important, because they're like, when I first interviewed you for something, I was like, dude, you're the guy. Like, you used to email me back directly. Like, I got your personal response. I felt like I was talking to like I use your platform and your software, and then I get responses from you. Lowering the barrier to entry is the important part, because you want them to respond, and if they feel like you just gave them homework, they're probably not going to do it. One was an older lady. She's like, I love reading these kind of books, and like, I picked up your book. It looked really interesting. I can't wait to read it. I'm gonna let you know. And I think she actually maybe that same person came back to me later after she read it, and she asked me like 10 questions, and that was really cool too, because it's almost like some answers she knew. I think she just wanted to see what the author of the book would say about her question, and then some she was really curious, which made me, one, I know she read the book because she wouldn't have known those questions otherwise, and two, I was like, man, this person's like, this is my biggest fan besides my wife. Like, this is awesome. I stumbled into this method. The first time I was like, maybe that's a happy accident. So I went back and did the exact same thing a second time, and it got the same kind of results. So what I did was I and this isn't free, but I went and paid like a cheap fee for a promotional site for my genre and my book. Paired that with like newsletter swaps and some other things like with Story Origin, and then went into my KDP account and made my book free for those days that it launched. And I'm talking like skyrocket downloads, which I have seen on the back end of that, weeks and weeks later, like reviews and stuff trickling in from those things, which I think is another reason why I've been able to get, almost 200 plus reviews across Goodreads and Amazon. And I don't think it would have been as successful if I didn't also pair it with like newsletter swaps and stuff, like with Story Origin. So I kind of like promo stack these things to make it as hard of a hit as I could. And it worked twice, which was awesome. I hit number one across multiple categories in both the Amazon US store and the Amazon UK store. I landed actually in the top 25 of the entire Kindle store for free books. I think from doing that twice, my total downloads probably came, I don't know, probably like just shy of like 8,000 from doing it twice. Like, that's total from both of them. Which some days I'd get on there and it'd be like, I'd see like 2,500 downloads on my book in like a day. I was like, what is happening? And if you do like I did and you screenshot those things, you can use those for like promotional material and stuff later on. You can share that with I shared that with my list, and they were all, you know, I don't do stuff like that often because it makes you seem like you're bragging. But I was like, hey, like, oh, check this out, and they're like, oh, that's and all these responses like, that's so cool. We're so happy for you. We're so proud of you. When you're on Story Origin and you can go join somebody's like group promotion or something, right? I always tell people that's great, but you can also organize your own group promotion. And the cool thing about that is you get to decide where your book lands on that group promotion page. So if you and I've seen this happen multiple times. I've done it when I run my own group promotion versus joining somebody's group promotion. My downloads and stuff like that is always higher from my own because I just put my book at the top. I could go get a drink of water from the fridge and come sit back down, and I could have my group promotion done. Even if you're not like a tech genius, like I'm not, I've taught myself some things, but I'm not like a sit down on a computer and just figure everything out kind of guy. And then also, like, one thing I really like about Story Origin is how willing and open authors are to accepting new authors. Because I remember getting started out, I think it's just important to say, I was like, it shows how many people are on your email list. And it's like, you see this big goose egg. Like, what's the point of even asking somebody to take me in? Because I got zero people. They do it every time. Story Origin to me is unique in that aspect because it's such an open, community, especially for people just getting started, which you can feel so overwhelmed and so defeated really early on. So I actually love when people apply and I see their list is super small or non-existent because like I could think back to I'd be sending text to my buddy. I'm like, dude, I've got 10 people on my list, bro. This is crazy. And then next week I'm like, dude, I got 75. Like this doesn't make any sense. And then obviously you look at it now and it seems funny, but getting started, like it can be so difficult. It feels like you're never going to get the momentum to keep going or even get your feet off the ground. I'm probably nearing like 2,000. Like, it wasn't that long ago that I had zero people. Like really, like I haven't been doing this for 10 years. Like it was not that long ago. There are things that you need to do behind the scenes that feel like it's going to take forever. It's basically like building the foundation for your house, but you're not always going to be working on the foundation. Eventually, you're going to start adding cool things like the bathroom that you want, the bedroom that you want, and the kitchen with the island and stuff like that. So there are things like we talked about, like the email sequences, having a reader magnet, or if you've got a first book, you just do what I did and just use that as your reader magnet, and then figuring, things out like Story Origin was where I got my first people onto my email list, so it was figuring it out. Now looking back, it's like doing all that work to get started. I feel like you do like hours and hours and hours of work to get one person on your list, but then it becomes a little bit easier and a little bit easier, and then you get to the point like within the next couple of weeks I'll have dozens, if not over 100 more emails onto my list just from knowing how to do certain things, creating your own group promo, joining newsletter swaps. Especially if you're starting out, just focus on Story Origin, figure the things out, all the different features and stuff that it has. It's not that hard to figure out, but once you figure it out, getting it set up and doing it each time is like you basically have created this blueprint, and then it's just plug and play is what it feels like now. I will at the minimum send at least one email a month to this list. I try to make it like bi-weekly as long as I feel like the email I'm sending them isn't going to be completely pointless, right? Because how do you expect to have an engagement or have a relationship with these people if you email them once every 3 months? Like you're not, like it's just not going to happen. I'll share something maybe like my daughter did that was cute, or my son that I thought was hilarious, or like maybe I'm like I just went and saw Top Gun Maverick. I thought it was great. Like anybody else go see to a movie lately? If I'm going to share a personal story, I've done this a few times where like I'll use something that's happened to me and this is just the way I write. I'll use personal situations, things that have happened to me, locations, like all these different relationships. I use those and I put them into my books because it just makes it easier because it's like I don't have to recreate this stuff. A lot of the stuff that's happened actually works for my genre, like thrillers and stuff like that. I'll share that. I'll be like, hey, this one time at camp that I used to go to every summer, like this happened to me, but actually I use camp as a setting for the one of my books, like my debut novel. Part of the book goes to this camp that I went to as a kid, and it takes part in like, and they're like, oh, that's super cool. Like they not only they hear a story about me in real life with something happening, but I use that same location and scenery and imagery and stuff, and actually I have that in my book as well. When you're getting started in something like this, there's so many different things to do and get set in place. And I recommend you do not wait until your book is published to get started on the other stuff. You can work on your email list. You can build your sequence out. You can start getting people on it with your reader magnet. Like we talked about, you're just building the foundation of your house, and it's going to take a lot of work early on, but then you don't really have to go back and touch these things again. What you're getting from something like Story Origin versus like having to go and try and figure out 10 different places, it's going to be way easier. And I'm talking, especially getting started out, like you have to find somewhere like this. And to me, like, I don't recommend anything else but Story Origin. It's like this community of authors that they're coming together online. Like, you never really meet these people, but they're all willing to help. And when somebody comes to me, this is the first thing I tell them, along with all these other, foundation. Story Origin is part of the foundation. Let me put it that way. If you're going to build your house, if Story Origin is in that foundation of your house, or it should be, it'll make it way easier. I promise.